What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Execration. And in this Chord Progression Monday, we're going to check out at least 5 of the most popular and widely used chord progressions and what they are at their base level. Okay, so we're about almost 20 chord progressions into this series. We've done originals, we've done some famous songs, we've done stuff from movies and video games, and I haven't really delved into, basically what is a chord progression and how they function. And we're not going to get too into that. We're just going to kind of talk about the most popular ones, and we're going to gloss over just a little bit of theory. Okay? So just so you understand what we're talking about here, when I start shouting out numbers like 1, 4, 5, 6, you have an idea of what I'm talking about. Okay? So I am in standard tuning. If you want a link to any of these progressions or the tabs, down in the description below, you can find that. Okay? So now, when you make a scale, right, there are 7 notes. And then that 8th note is your root note again. So what a chord is you're building every other note and you're creating 3-note chords. And so forth, okay? Now, you can build a chord on every note of that scale, and the first note would be the 1 chord. The second note would be the 2 chord. The third note would be the 3 chord, and so on, okay? Now, some of these chords are major, some of these chords are minor. I'm not gonna get too into depth of why that is right now, because you need to know some basic formulas to figure that out. All of these chords within that scale or within the key serve a function. They have a role to play, a job to serve, okay? And some of them are kind of just home base. Some of them are kind of transition chords, taking us somewhere, going to the next part. And some of them are tension chords, right? And they resolve back to your home or your root, okay? So that's what you're gonna see in a lot of these common chord progressions. So where do we start? The most common pop rock progression ever involves the 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 5 chord, or a 1, 4, 5 progression, okay? So if we're in the key of C, right? C being our 1, C, D, E, F would be our 4 chord, G would be our 5 chord. Now this is the most common pop rock progression and variations of in history, right? It goes all the way back to Mozart and is in all kinds of modern day pop rock music, all right? And it serves the basis of a 12-bar blues progression, so it is super important as a guitar player to understand and how to play this. And for all of these examples, I would recommend playing them in multiple keys, not just one. Be able to play them in all keys, really, all right? So again, whether you're talking Blitzkrieg Bop from Ramones, whether you're talking about an AC/DC song, You Shook Me All Night Long, or a 12-bar blues, these songs are there, these chords are there. Right? So if we're in the key of C, we've already said it's C, F, and G. And this is really important because it kind of ties into what I was just talking about with your home bass, your transition, and your tension chords. And again, I'm not going to get too much into the theory on this. We can do that in another video. But essentially, your 1 chord is obviously your root, your home bass. Your 4 chord acts as a transition, and then your 5 chord is always your tension chord. Okay? It tends to be your dominant chord. When we change these to 7th chords, this is what you see in a 12-bar blues. Okay? And mainly because the tension found in that chord resolves to the 1 chord. Okay? So in a 1, 4, 5 progression, you have that home bass, transition, tension. All right? Cool. Moving on, and this one is tied to that first one. And then for my jazz fans out there, the most common progression in jazz is a 2, 5, 1. Okay? So if we're in the key of C, That means C, D is our 2 chord, and then G would still be our 5 chord. Now, your 2 chord happens to be minor, okay, and then obviously in the jazz world, they turn in everything in the 7th chords. Right, and then you have that same concept of a 4-5-1, but in the jazz world, they give you all the tonality, right? They give you the minor, they give you the tension, and then they give you the kind of major resolution. And again, tying that into that, your 2 chord and your 4 chord are very closely related, which means they serve the same function or role. So your 2 chord is your transition chord, your 5 chord is your tension chord, and then your 1 chord is your resolution. So now let's move on to some more standard pop rock chord progressions. They're all going to involve the 1-4-5, and now we're going to bring in the 6th chord. Okay? And again, the same rules apply if we're in the key of C, D, E, F, G, A. A would be our 6th chord. It's also a minor chord. And if we want to talk about roles and functions, your 6th chord is very similar to your home or your 1 chord, which is why so many chords or songs, I should say, you can sit here and play an A minor and a C chord, and they sound good together, but they also doesn't sound like you're going anywhere, right? It can be one part of a song, and that's essentially because they're both root harmony, okay? So standard pop rock progressions, let's do one, right? We're gonna do 1, 5, 6, 4. And I'm gonna call this one and the next one our Green Day progressions, because Green Day is great at using these basically pop rock progressions in all their songs, right? You might recognize this one from When I Come Around. Continuing on that with our Green Day train, let's switch those up. And you're going to find a lot of chord progressions. If you go Google search like most popular chord progressions and what have you, you're going to find a lot of variations of what we just talked about, right? They're just going to be in different order. And all of these chords just kind of flow nicely and they create a nice repetitive loop on each other. Okay, so that was the 1, 5, 6, 4, right? And again, just to explain that, if I'm in the key of G, G would be my 1, D would be my 5, E would be my 6 chord, and my 4 chord would be C. Okay? Very nice. Now let's talk about a variation of that, and we're going to continue using our Green Day explanation, right? We're going to go 6, 4, 1, 5. All right? So we'll stay in the same key. So we have E minor would be our 6, C would be our 4 chord, and we're going to move to the 1 chord, which is G, and then D would be the 5 chord of that key. And we can reference, again, lots of songs. I think there's that video online where it's like 50 songs with the same progression. Yeah, all right? So and again, it's super common. You're going to hear these in tons of pop rock songs dating back decades, and I'm just going to stop here for a moment and talk about, my own personal interest in playing and writing, right? We tend to do a lot of hard rock, metal on this channel, right? And you're not necessarily going to hear these progressions straight up like that, right? And hopefully, if you're familiar with the videos on this channel, we've gone into ways to kind of expand the harmony of these chord progressions, use them in interesting ways, come up with voicings that have maybe minor extensions or some dissonance put in them, right? Coming up with interesting ways to play these chord progressions. And I'll probably dive into that. Maybe we'll take these chord progressions and show us like, oh, how can we make these more rock sense or maybe more harmonically interesting with, sevenths and ninths and all of that theory jargon. All right? So those are some basic pop rock progressions. I implore you to do C, key of C, key of G, key of D, go through your circle of fifths and what have you. All right? So now, to finish it off, let's talk about maybe something a little more harmonically interesting. We kind of stayed away from seventh chords and all that, and I'm going to call this one my Stevie Wonder progression. All right? Stevie Wonder writes phenomenal music, and he's just a master of songwriting and chord harmony. And this one's going to be a little different from the other ones. So this one is going to be a 1 chord, and then we're going to change that to a dominant chord, which we really haven't talked about. And like I said, it's usually the 5 chord, right? But it's going to be 1, and then 1, 7, which means a dominant 7 on that 1 chord, and then the 4 chord, and then to a flat 7 chord, meaning a whole step behind the root. Okay? So for example, if we do this in the key of F, we can have, I'm just picking keys here. So we have F is our 1. Change that to a dominant chord, your 1, 7. Okay? Move to the 4 chord. And then a dominant chord, a whole step behind the 1 chord. So if F is our 1, a whole step would be 2 frets down, and that is our turn it into a 7th chord, right? And when you say flat 7 in the Roman numerals, all that means is a minor 7th in relation to the root note, right? So again, if our root note is on 8, the flat 7 would be a whole step behind that. And you'll see a whole slew of variations on this chord progression in a lot of Stevie Wonder's music. Consider that the backdoor cadence or the backdoor resolutions. And like I said, we can, if you do 7th chords on these, right? Really pretty chord progression, works really well. And I'm a big fan of chromatic lines. And when you do that, just fun little theory here. If you're on the 1 chord and you make it a major 7 chord, and then you make it a dominant chord, well, that major 7th interval now becomes a flat 7 or a minor 7, moves down a step, and then in relation to the B flat chord, the 3rd of that chord is a half step down, and then if I make that flat 7 dominant chord, that note drops down another half step, right? So you'll see that a lot playing through the different voices in the chords, right? It works really well, and you have that hidden chromatic line in there you can use for other guitar parts or just, focus on. And there you go. 5 of the most common progressions in music. All right? I implore you as a guitar player to be familiar with these and then also kind of dig into them a little bit and expand on the harmony and come up with creative ways. Because like I've said on this channel, me as just my own personal preferences, you're never going to see me go. It's just not my playing style. I'm always going to find a way to come up with maybe interesting chord voicings. More interesting to my ears. All right? Down in the description below, you can find a link for these chord progressions. And as always, let me know what you come up with. So until then, I'll see you next time. Thanks a lot.